Welcome to the Open Science Data Cloud demo. We're very glad that you're here. My name is Walt Wells. I'm the Operations Manager for the Open Cloud Consortium. I'm joined today by my colleague, Allison Heath, from the Laboratory for Advanced Computing at the University of Chicago. Today's demo, we're going to cover a wide range of topics regarding the Open Science Data Cloud, like the OCC, the Open Science Data Cloud itself, how to get a resource allocation on the Open Science Data Cloud. And we're going to conclude with a demonstration of how to do an analysis on the Open Science Data Cloud. At the very end of the demo, we're going to have a Q&A period in which we'll unmute everybody. You can feel free to ask questions via microphone, or you can type them into chat, and we'll discuss your questions. So if you could, any questions that you have, please hold them to the end, and we'll look forward to answering those at that time. The Open Science Data Cloud is managed by the Open Cloud Consortium. The OCC is a US-based 501c3 not-for-profit. It manages cloud computing infrastructure supporting scientific, environmental, medical, healthcare research like the Open Science Data Cloud. It also manages a number of cloud computing testbeds like the Open Cloud Testbed. For more information on the OCC, a list of our members, a list of our working groups, how you would join, you can go to the OCC website at www.opencloudconsortium.org. The OCC is divided into working groups. Those working groups include an Open Science Data Cloud working group, a working group with NASA called Project NASA that does real-time analysis of satellite imagery from NASA with the goal of flood relief and disaster relief. There's a partnership with the Institute for Genomics and Systems Biology at the University of Chicago and the Model Code Consortium called BioNimbus that analyzes genomics data. We also have funding from the National Science Foundation for what we call the PIRE program. The goal of the PIRE program is to train the next generation of big data scientists. The opportunities in the PIRE are for studying abroad during the summer, a fully funded fellowship to study with one of our international partners. You can see there are some other OCC working groups listed here. We have a wide range of members for the OCC. This is a small sampling. Private companies, universities, federal agencies and labs, international partners, and some important technical partners like Starlight and the National Land Rail that help provide high-speed data research networks. Let's start talking about the Open Science Data Cloud and clouds in general. Now, as you can see from this, this is a rack, but this is definitely not a cloud. This is a cloud, generally multiple racks put together. The Open Science Data Cloud is an open source cloud infrastructure for supporting scientific research that has moderate to large computation and storage requirements. Currently, the OSDC has about 7,000 cores and 6 petabytes of usable storage. It's split into both public and protected infrastructures. Now, what that means is that if you have data sets that aren't particularly sensitive, that don't have security requirements associated with them, then a public cloud like our Sullivan resource is an excellent place for you to do your analysis. If you are working with data sets that are protected, sensitive human data, genomics data, things like that, we currently have 2 protected data clouds, Atwood and the BioNimbus PDC, where you can analyze protected genomics data. The OSDC is also connected to high-performance research networks. Generally, if you are receive an OSDC resource allocation and you're with a university that's also connected to a high-performance research network, that will allow you generally 40 gig transfers, sometimes upwards of 100 gig, depending on where your connections are. At the OSDC, we also like to name our resources and clusters after prominent Chicago architects. So we have resources like Sullivan, Skidmore. We have a larger project where we're going to be building a data center called the Burnham Center for Advanced Knowledge Discovery. And the application for receiving a resource allocation is generally available to anyone who's doing scientific research. You can go to the OSDC website and apply there. We'll talk some more later about the specifics of how you would receive a resource allocation and what that means when you receive one. What you get with the OSDC? Well, in order to log in, first we need to authenticate using your university credentials via InCommon, Canary, or UK Federation. Now, if you're not familiar with those organizations, InCommon is generally for United States research institutions. Canary deals with Canadian research institutions. And the UK Federation deals with the UK. They all authenticate through Shibboleth. So when you log into the OSDC, your university or research institution releases security credentials to a service provider like the OSDC. And then all you need to do is basically log in to the OSDC with your institutional email. If you have a research project that has already been approved, generally we prefer very strongly to authenticate through these three methods, but we also allow in instances where a research project has already been approved, the authentication through OpenID, which is Gmail and or Yahoo. When you're on the OSDC, you can launch virtual machines, virtual clusters, and select projects also have access to our large Hadoop clusters, which include the OCC-Y resource and Skidmore. Again, these are generally for participating members in the OCC and also selected projects like Project Matsu. When you have an OSDC account, you have access to multiple petabytes of open and protected data. The OSDC allows you to manage files, collections of files, collections of files, and manage users, groups of users, accounts, and sub-accounts. What that generally implies is that if you are in a lab as a researcher and you want to share files and results with other researchers in your lab that have Open Science Data Cloud resource allocations, we can set up ways to enable you to do that. The Open Science Data Cloud, again, is also connected to high-performance research networks. So you generally get fast and efficient file transfer, but we also recommend two transfer protocols called UDT and UDR to help move those files even faster. The OSDC is what we like to think of as the next generation of microscope or telescope, and we call it a data scope. So something like the Open Science Data Cloud allows your team, you and your colleagues, to make discoveries using algorithms over the Open Science Data Cloud across large big data sets. We think of the Open Science Data Cloud as serving the community that is the long tail of data science. So resource allocations on the Open Science Data Cloud are generally for a few large data science projects and a number of smaller data science projects. We generally think that projects that have resources where they can either build their own infrastructure or utilize an existing service like Amazon Web Service, Google Cloud, or Rackspace will be utilizing infrastructure like that in order to do their research. In order to receive an allocation on the Open Science Data Cloud, generally resource allocations are for about 16 cores and a terabyte of storage. If you have a particular research problem that's going to need more resources than that, once you have an approved resource allocation, you can ask us to increase your quota. That's a very simple matter to do. You just submit a ticket to our support system. It's very important to note that due to space limitations, not everyone who's going to be applying for OSDC resources will receive them. The OSDC resources are given out by our Resource Allocation Committee, which generally meets about once a month and reviews all incoming requests. Anyone who does receive a resource allocation will be reviewing your allocation periodically to make sure that you're making progress with your research questions and making appropriate use of the allocation. Anyone who does receive an allocation is also expected to cite the Open Science Data Cloud in any papers that you've written or any posters, anything that you've done using this work, and generally provide us with a link to that work. One of the nice advantages to the Open Science Data Cloud is our public data commons. Essentially, this is about a petabyte of storage that's dedicated to public scientific data sets. These data sets are in a wide variety of disciplines, including earth science, genomics, astronomy, social sciences. And one important thing to note about the public data commons, you don't necessarily need to have an account or a resource allocation on the OSDC in order to access them. Anyone can go to the OSDC and transfer files from the OSDC public data commons without a resource allocation. The advantage to having that resource allocation is then you don't have to deal with file transfer. You can do your analysis over the public data sets that are in the data commons right in the OSDC without having to move those transfers around. We also really like it when individuals and organizations nominate data sets that they think would be relevant to the scientific community at large. So if you have a data set that you think would be helpful to the scientific community, please let us know, and we'll consider adding it to the public data commons. I'm now going to turn this presentation over to my colleague Allison Heath, who is going to talk to us a little bit more about some of the specifics of the OSDC and lead us through a demonstration of how to do an analysis.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thanks, Walt, for that great introduction. So I'm going to kind of dive a little bit more into the technical details of the OSDC and kind of show a quick demo of how you might use it. So if people are familiar with cloud infrastructure, the OSDC is we consider it basically a community cloud. So we run open source based architecture. It's mostly based on OpenStack these days. And OpenStack is how we manage VM images. And we are currently running Essex and upgrading to Havana. And actually probably shortly Icebox, I believe, is the next one. So if you're familiar with OpenStack clouds, the OSDC will probably be very familiar to you. The main kind of difference between us and a lot of other clouds is that we host a large distributed file system underneath the cloud called GlusterFS. We are actually bringing online, besides a little bit out of date, we are bringing online Object Store via Swift. So people are interested in using object stores. We'll also have that available shortly. And as well, we also have Hadoop clusters, as Walt mentioned, for specific projects. Click over to the, so if you're really interested in a little more detail on the cloud infrastructure, unlike Amazon, we can't give public IPs to everyone's VM. So there's actually a two-step process, similar to if you've worked with an HPC cluster or something like that before, where you go into the login node, and then from the login node, you can access your VMs. And the VMs all have access to this large distributed GlusterFS store that I'll show you. And so, yeah, let's go ahead and transition to the demo. I think we have a slide. Yeah, a lot of people ask me, what does the OSDC look like? A significant portion of it is hosted here at University of Chicago, but we have other sites at Northwestern, Lawrence Livermore, and FIU down in Florida. And that was just a quick shot of what it looks like here. I'm going to share my desktop now. All right. So yeah, so if you're interested in the Open Science Data Cloud, the best resource to go to is our website, www.opensciencedatacloud.org. Here you'll find out, further details that Walt went over pretty nicely. If you're interested in applying, you can just go to the application page. And the very first thing we'll do is ask you to log into an identity provider. So since we mainly serve the research community, if you're in an organization or an institution that shares the federated authentication, you can log in through there. So, I'm University of Chicago, but as you can see, we have quite a few institutions and are adding more. If for some reason your organization is not in there, you can sign in using Google or Yahoo, and this will bring you to an application page where you can describe your project and tell us why you're interested in using the OSDC. We also have a list of our public data sets here, so you can kind of go through. We have some large genomic ones, like 1,000 genomes. We also have a lot of social data, City of Chicago, as well as geospatial data, satellite imagery, and other things like that. So you can kind of scroll down, look and see if there's data sets that are interest you or important to your research. And if you have something that you think the community in general will be interested in, please let us know. Once you get an account, you can go to the OSDC console. So this is our self-service console built on a piece of software called Tukey, which is open source. You can sign in here. So this is going to take me to my University of Chicago credentials. So we do federated login. Oh, of course, it automatically logged me in. Let me just show you. I want to clear my history. Of course, it's automatically logging me in today. But what you would normally see is it actually brings me to University of Chicago login. And the federated login actually authenticates against University of Chicago. And that securely comes back and tells us that, yes, indeed, you are an authenticated user there. The first page you'll get to is a usage page, so it'll tell you how many VMs you're currently using, number of CPUs, and RAM. As you can see, since I'm an admin here, I get a significantly large quota for testing purposes. The next place you want to go is images and snapshots. So on this page, these are all the standard virtual machine images that you can launch. So up at the top are the ones that the OSDC distributes. So these are vanilla versions of Ubuntu, CentOS, and we're actually bringing online some of the newer versions as well. If you scroll down, these are snapshots that people have made for other purposes. So the kind of basic workflow is you'll start the vanilla Ubuntu image, you'll install the software that you want to use, and then you can save it as a snapshot. For example, I've been working on a lot of RNA-seq analysis, so we've been creating RNA-seq images. And then you can start these, and when you launch these, those software is already installed and configured like you did previously, so you don't have to repeat that process. So you can go to launch a VM. So let's say I want to start a new Ubuntu machine. What we're doing here is it's going to come up, and I'm going to be able to select the size of the server that I want to start. So we have different flavors, anywhere from 1 CPU and no storage to, I think the M2 extra extra large are the largest ones with 16 cores. 64 gigs of memory, and just a small storage on the VM itself, because as I'll show you, you actually have access to a much larger cluster store on these VMs as well. So I'm going to select medium, and I'm just going to give it a name. For those of you who have used clouds before, there's a concept called a key pair, which gives you a public-private key pair, which is how we get access to the VMs directly. I won't go over it right now. It's a little tricky if you've never done it before to set up, but once you have it set up, it's very easy to get access directly into your VMs. So I'm going to select my key pair. I'm going to launch this machine. And so now what it's doing is it's going and finding resources on the OSDC, starting up this virtual machine, and basically creating a new Linux server for you. So scheduling it. And you can see all the other instances I have running right now, the different flavors. And then once you have a machine installed and configured that you like, you can do create snapshot, and that will save the state of the machine, create one of those snapshots, and you can launch it again either multiple times. You know, if you need to launch 100 machines to do your analysis, that's what this kind of capability gives you. There's also the Access and Security tab. As I said, you have this concept called key pairs. So here you can manage all your key pairs. I'm not going to go over that in detail today. So at this point, this is kind of what you can do on the web console. And now you really have to go to the command line to really take full advantage of the infrastructure that's starting up here. So I'm going to go to my terminal. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to SSH into the Sullivan cloud. So as you can see, all of these are started on Sullivan, which is the public cloud. So Sullivan username, datacloud.org. And this will take me to the head node of Sullivan. And on here, we also have command line commands that can also tell you information about your VMs. So for example, Nova list, these are all the VMs that you see displayed on the website as well. Now the important thing here is now the IP address that you get is a private IP address. So I can now SSH into that VM as the Ubuntu user. And now I'm on my virtual machine. I have root access here. I can actually, you know, do things like apt-get update to update my packages. I can install things through apt. I can change root configurations on this VM, get it configured exactly how I want. Or if you know you have a friend in the lab who's more adept at this, they can do that, save the image, and you can use it. So that's basically it for the basics for launching a VM. it started up. You can see, for example, on this VM, there's only 2 processors. If I go to another VM, you can see that this VM actually has 7 CPUs accessible to it. So, you know, at this point, the cloud resource is really kind of infrastructure as a service. So if you're used to working on the command line, you're looking for ways to develop tools, I mean, this is exactly what you want. And so when I'm on the head node here, I'm logged in as myself. And if I look in my directory, this is actually my Gluster store here. So if we then go to, let's see, maybe one of the new ones. You'll see that now I'm in GlusterFS users Heath. And you'll notice that on my VM, I also have direct access to all of this data. Something I do want to make clear is that we don't try to curate what's on the public data. We leave that to the communities who have created these data sets. So when you go into that public data directory, for example, 1,000 genomes, we just take the FTP directory. So it's organized however the 1,000 genomes FTP directory is. So we try not to change things in terms of the curation and the standards of what the different communities are doing. So I'm going to show one quick thing that I've been working on recently. So how do you actually do some sort of interesting analysis here? So what I've done is I was actually doing some work on some RNA-seq data looking at expression levels of different genes in different populations. So on the OSDC, we have these data sets already. I created a VM, installed a couple tools like TopHat and Cufflinks, used about 20 VMs, and actually that's a good point, something I forgot to mention, is that not just, we don't just have the capability to launch individual VMs, but we have capability to launch clusters of VMs. So under here, you also see launch cluster. And this is a very similar dialog where what you'll see is you can do the compute node count. You can select the flavor of the compute nodes. So, you know, if your computation uses 4 cores optimally, you can use the large one, or if you need more cores, you can use other flavors, and you can specify the number you want. So if you wanted 3 compute nodes, let's just do medium size, using this Ubuntu image, or if I wanted to use one of my snapshots, so for example, one of my RNA-seq analysis snapshots, that will already have all the software pre-installed on these compute nodes. I can hit launch cluster, and it'll start up a head node and then 3 VMs. Oh, I need to have the key pair. 3 VMs that are attached to that cluster. So you can actually, instead of SSHing into each VM individually, instead of accessing each VM individually, you can go to the head node and then submit jobs from there. All right. So that's how I did the original analysis. And then let's say I want to view my results. So I've been doing most of this in R, and R has a nice package called Shiny that allows you to have create nice kind of quick user interfaces. And what I've done here is I've actually already started up a Shiny server on this VM. And then this is a little tricky, but it's not too bad. We can port forward. That web server running on my VM to my local host here. And what we see here is a visualization of those RNA-seq results that I've already processed on the cloud. So this is reading data off of the Gluster store on the OSDC, using R code to determine the different expression levels of these genes across multiple patients. and then clustering them and displaying them in a heat map fashion. This is just my own personal little tool that I'm using to explore this data. So obviously it's not pretty and shiny. Well, it's using shiny. But for example, if I want to add a gene here, I can dynamically update that. It'll recluster them, and you'll see that EGFR has now appeared here. Or if, I think the CDH1 is kind of dominating other clusters I might see down here, I can delete that gene from the list that I'm interested in. As I said, this is just my own personal analysis tool, so it doesn't do error checking, but as you can see, it'll delete that, recluster them, and I can look at the visualizations here. Now, obviously, this is just my own little personal project. We do have other large projects that are using the OSDC kind of in a similar manner, although they actually have real host names and don't have to do this port forwarding. One I'd like to demo real quick is the Bookworm project. So what they've done is they've taken the archive data set, done some processing on it on the OSDC, and you can go to their site here, Bookworm, culturomics.org. And I should emphasize this is a separate group. Mainly our collaboration with them is just providing the infrastructure. So they did this analysis, and you can go in and check, different words across academic papers. So, just as a quick little thing, let's say we want to look at cloud computing in the category computer science versus, I don't know, let's say weather and everything. So we'll get rid of that. And it'll go and it'll tell you the percentage of text that had those terms in it. So you can see cloud computing kind of started shooting up in the computer science arena in around 2008. Well, weather kind of remained pretty steady, although there's kind of an interesting uptick somewhere in 2007. And I should acknowledge everyone who's involved with this. So the Culture Observatory is the ones who designed this. And then this is hosted on our system and using our infrastructure to do the processing and process requests that are coming in. The other project I want to show is Matsu. So Walt touched on Matsu, Project Matsu a little bit. This is a collaboration this is a collaboration with NASA, where EO1 data is being constantly streamed into the OSDC. Pre-processing is done in our cloud infrastructure, and then daily processing of different kinds of analytics are actually done in the Hadoop infrastructure. And you can go here and actually see the reports that are produced each day. Recently, we found some interesting volcanic activity. So here's Mount Etna. I believe it's in Sicily. And you can see that the satellite data came in. It was processed. CO2 quantities are what they're looking for. It's kind of faint to see here. But this automatically identified that there were high levels of CO2 in this area, and Mount Etna is known to have some recent volcanic activity going on. So we look for things like CO2, cloud cover, water, and people are continuing to create new analytics and process in Matsu. So that's mainly what I have in terms of showing the demo. I think we'd be happy to take any questions. If people want me to go in more detail on things or have questions on how to get allocations, I think this is the time.
well, if there's no more questions, I think we'll wrap up the demonstration. Thank you all for your time today. We appreciate it, and look forward to hearing from you a little bit more regarding any interest you might have in getting the resource allocation on the Open Science Data Cloud. Thanks again. Take care.